Classifying matter, pure substances. By the end of this video, you should be able to define matter, identify a pure substance, classify a pure substance as either an element or a compound. The first thing that we're going to talk about is matter. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Matter is made up of atoms. An atom is the smallest unit of matter. Atoms can combine or bond to form a molecule. Matter can be broken down into either a pure substance or a mixture. The first thing that we're going to talk about and the focus in this video is a pure substance. A pure substance has a definite chemical and physical property. Pure substances can either be elements or compounds. Elements are all one type of atom, and compounds are when they're bonded together. So let's look at elements first. Elements are pure substances that cannot be separated into simpler substances by physical or chemical reactions. Elements can only be separated by nuclear reactions, breaking them into their subatomic particles like protons, neutrons, electrons, and smaller particles. Let's say that we wanted to look at a brick of gold. Each atom inside of that brick of gold would all be the same. It would all look like the picture on the left, with the nucleus and all the electrons are on the outside. All atoms of the same element have the same physical and chemical properties. You cannot break apart that atom unless you have a nuclear reaction. All atoms of an element have the same properties and they all look the same in an atomic diagram. So in that picture, they're all just little black dots. That's all one type of thing. So that's an element. Elements are shown on the periodic table. Some elements have only one letter for their symbol, like potassium, which is letter K, and oxygen, which is letter O. Others have two letters. The first letter is always capitalized, like sodium, which is Na, and aluminum, which is Al. Be careful with aluminum because some people think that's an I a lot of times, but I is actually iodine. That's a completely different thing. So you got to be very careful. That's Al. Next, let's talk about compounds. Compounds are pure substances made up of two or more different elements joined by a chemical bond. We can tell that they are bonded because they are clearly touching in an atomic diagram and form a specific repeating pattern. So if you look in the picture on the top, it's one big circle with two little circles, and it's a repeating pattern there. Those are bonded together, so that's a compound. Below that, it's two white and one black for all of them. That's again a repeating pattern. They're all the same, and those are touching, so those are bonded together. Compounds are always a specific ratio called a chemical formula. Since compounds are made up of two or more elements, compounds have two or more capital letters. NaCl with the capital N and the capital C, that's sodium and chlorine. H2O, the capital H is hydrogen and the capital O is oxygen. KOH, the capital K means potassium, the capital O means oxygen, and the capital H is hydrogen. Compounds can be separated by chemical reactions to break apart the chemical bonds. So we'll learn more about physical and chemical properties later and reactions, but at this point we should know that compounds can be broken apart in our lab with a chemical reaction. Elements we are not going to break apart in our lab because we cannot do nuclear reactions in a high school chemistry lab. So let's do some practice problems. First one, pure water, H2O. Is that an element or is that a compound? There's two capital letters there, a capital H and a capital O. So I know that that is two elements bonded together. So that means it's a compound. Next one, copper wire, Cu. There is only one capital C there. So that U goes with it. So I would look on the periodic table, if it didn't already say copper right there, and I would see that that is an element because it's directly from the periodic table of elements. That's one thing. So if we look at that copper wire, those are all atoms of copper, and together they form the copper wire. This one's probably going to get you. Are those elements or compounds? H2, N2, O2, F2, Cl2, Br2, and I2. When you look at it, you're probably thinking compound because you can see that they are bonded together. However, if you look at the letters, each one of those only has one capital letter. So these are called diatomic. So some atoms, such as hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, those things do not exist in nature just hanging out by themselves. They're always going to be bonded to something else. So like oxygen is O2, that would be two oxygens bonded together. So that's the elemental form of oxygen. Same for iodine, bromine, chlorine, those are all called diatomic. Now your tests and quizzes will not be that picky, but that is considered an element even though they are bonded, but it's because they're elements bonded to the same element. Like two hydrogens or two nitrogens, two fluorines are bonded together. This picture, is that an element or a compound? That's a compound because you have the white and the black ones bonded together in a repeating pattern. You can tell that they are touching, so they are bonded. Which one can be broken down by chemical reactions? So what's the one that we're actually going to do in the high school chemistry lab? Those would be compounds. You can break a compound down. Cannot be broken down by physical or chemical changes. These require nuclear reactions to break them down. Those are elements. We're not doing that here in our lab.
Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. The atom is the smallest unit of matter. An element is a pure substance that cannot be separated into simpler substances by physical or chemical reactions. Elements are all of the same type of atoms. The symbol for elements has one capital letter, like CO is cobalt, Br is bromine, I is iodine, H is hydrogen. Elements cannot be separated by physical or chemical reactions. A compound is a pure substance made up of two or more different elements joined by chemical bonds. Compounds are made up of more than one type of atom chemically bonded. Compounds have two or more capital letters in their name. CO here means carbon and oxygen. H and Br are hydrogen and bromine, and Na and Cl are sodium and chlorine chemically bonded. Compounds can be separated by a chemical reaction. Notice that capital C and capital O mean carbon and oxygen. However, a capital C and a lowercase o means cobalt. Matter can be divided by pure substances or mixtures. This video only discussed pure substances. Pure substances are either elements or compounds.